So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to the Kenai SISMA for inviting me to be here today to present on building the Alaska First Detector Network. As you heard, my name is Gooseberry Peter. I work for the University of Alaska Fairbanks Cooperative Extension Service as a program assistant, and I am part of the statewide Cooperative Extension Test IPM team, and I serve on the O&E committee at the Alaska Invasive Species Partnership. Here's my contact info, and I'd like to encourage those of you who haven't already to check out the Cooperative Extension Service online catalog, where you can download invasive species publications. I'd also like to acknowledge the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Forest Service, whose funding has made this work possible. So what is the Alaska First Detector Network? Well, it's a work in progress. May be best defined by describing what it does, or rather what it will do. It will encourage and facilitates reporting of invasive species by recruiting first detectors and offering training and engagement at a citizen scientist pro-technician level. It will encompass all taxa and operate statewide. And in doing these things, it will support early detection and rapid response efforts in Alaska. So mossballs and ritter hornets are two recent examples that we're all familiar with of early detection and rapid response in action. In both cases, people saw something, they said something, and the response wheels were set in motion. That effort was critical to ultimately confirming the presence of zebra mussels and the absence of murder hornets here in Alaska. The Alaska First Detector Network will augment that equation by empowering, equipping, and encouraging people to make accurate and timely reports of invasive species. So there are numerous examples of successful efforts that are very similar, which we're using as models, including the National Plant Diagnostic Network's First Detector Program, the Yukon Invasive Species Council's Yukon Spotters Network, the Wisconsin First Detector Network, operated by the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension, and the Aquatic Invasive Species Detectors Program from the University of Minnesota Extension and Minnesota Aquatic Invasive Species Research Center. So there are four major components to the Alaska First Detector Network, which we are currently developing, and they are the network, the information flow, the training, and the website. So we'll briefly explore each component individually. The first component is the network. The network is the people and will be comprised of trained invasive species observers. They could be hikers, hunters, fishing folks, wildcrafters, field technicians, gardeners, students, anyone who is willing and interested in learning how to record and report invasive species. People who complete the requisite training courses can be certified as first detectors, which allows us to acknowledge their accomplishments and stay connected with them. While it is not necessary to become a certified first detector to report invasive species, we're hoping people will choose to complete the trainings and learn how to make their reporting as effective as possible. We're exploring ways to offer incentives to help make being a first detector fun and keep people engaged. This could include offering logo-bearing material, or as I call it, swag, like stickers, refrigerator magnets, that kind of thing, or to discounts to workshops, challenges and contests, and other ways to recognize and appreciate first detectors. In addition to observing and reporting invasive species, motivated and educated people can help spread awareness. So hopefully first detectors will take what they learn from the trainings and their reporting endeavors and share it with others. The network is also an opportunity to focus detection efforts on targeted species or locations. For example, to support ongoing chokecherry outreach and management efforts, we could send an alert bulletin to the members of the First Detector Network that raises their initial awareness, draws them to the relevant training materials on the website, identifies the appropriate reporting portals, and thereby hopefully facilitates increased incidence and accuracy in choke cherry reporting. Building the Alaska First Detector Network also gives us the opportunity to address a perennial challenge in the invasive species management community, which is information flow. With more people making more reports, it becomes even more imperative to maintain a clear flow of information so that the right data are shared with the right people. Part of creating this network is coordinating with our reporting agencies to streamline the flow of information between people who make the reports, people who collect the reports, people who confirm the report data, people who use the data, and finally, the storage of the data. This is an ongoing coordination effort, so stay tuned for the final flowchart. The third component of the Alaska First Detector Network is the training. In a nutshell, there'll be core modules which people must complete if they want the certificate, and optional modules like electives that are more directional. There'll be quizzes for each module and the means to track course completion and progress towards certification. So in a little more detail, the core modules consist of an introduction to invasive species. What are they? Why are we concerned about them? Invasive species management, touching on all phases of management and approaches to control, IPM, and focusing on early detection, rapid response. Detection and reporting, which would be how to record data, how to take photos, how to collect samples, and who to send them to. And then optional modules would be more targeted, and that might be something species specific, like for Alodia, pike, or invasive slugs. It may also be audience specific, perhaps something aimed at gardeners, hunters, or floatplane pilots. Finally, we have the website. The First Detector Network website will be hosted under the new Alaska Invasive Species Partnership domain, which will be at alaskainvasives.org. The website will contain features for people to learn how to become a first detector, access the trainings, link to reporting tools. We will also use it to highlight reporting contests and other opportunities to facilitate continuing engagement, as well as provide news updates, alert bulletins, and links to other invasive species resources. Building the Alaska First Detector Network is a team effort. We at the UAF Cooperative Extension Service IPM creative team, that is Gino Graziano, Alex Weniger, and myself, we're working in cooperation with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Alaska State Division of Agriculture, the Alaska's Invasive Species Partnership, and hopefully with you. And we would welcome your feedback, any suggestions, any training content you'd like to share. If you're feeling artistically inclined, we would love to have your help designing our logo. And when the call comes, we ask that you please consider joining the Alaska First Detector Network and helping to spread the word. And thank you for listening. You've been very kind. If there's still time, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Gooseberry. Please type your questions into the chat if you have any. And I actually just chatted a question in there. So one thing that we've run into sometimes is when we've done targeted outreach, like building awareness around the European bird cherry, we've had an influx of citizen reporting in areas that we already know are infested. And so I'm wondering if you've considered during the training how to encourage first detectors to reference existing data points first.
That is an excellent consideration. As far as choke cherry goes, just speaking hypothetically, go back to, I would go back to the slide if it was on me, but anyway, the slide kind of pointed out that we were trying to highlight people to report it in targeted locations which would, I think, help eliminate part of that. So instead of walking down the street and reporting everything that's planted at, in the median strip that everybody knows about, hopefully we're steering them more towards the riparian areas, or at least the forested areas. But that's an excellent suggestion. And I think it's also part of the burden that we bear as verifiers and as data collectors is we don't want to discourage people from making reports by making it too precise of what we're asking them. And we of course have to thank them for their contribution, and even if it is the 10th time that we've seen it. And I think we're also looking for ways to identify our handling, at least with some of the cooperative extension stuff, so it's just easier to screen that kind of material out.
Sure, that makes sense. And then Maura had a question. How soon do you anticipate being done with the training modules?
Another excellent question. Right now we've taken an inventory of what we know of that's readily available, and we're working to build the website for AKISP as well as for the First Detector network. And so once those go live, we will then have the platform to present the training material that we have. And that being said, we've also identified some gaps with the materials that we have on hand where we need to be able to, especially with the core training materials, where we need to flesh things out or add things that are missing. And so we're also setting up ways that we can produce that kind of material, which again, if that's something, if people are sitting on PowerPoints or videos or anything that they feel gets that kind of information out there, we'd be happy to take a look at it and maybe borrow it or adapt it, because that makes it go faster. But in answer to your question, Maura, whenever it's ready. And I think the sooner the better.
Good answer. Well, we really appreciate that you are presenting at this stage in the project. I think it's helpful to give us all a heads up, so we can start thinking about ways we can support it. And Patrick Houlihan asked, do we have Canadian partners? It seems a likely source for crabs, ticks, and other invasives we know are close by.
That's an excellent point. Ironically, it was some of our Canadian partners that we first turned to when we were trying to put this all together conceptually. And Yukon Invasive Species Council was one of the first examples, and they're an excellent example of how we'd like ours to function. And that being said, I intend, once we have it all up and running, when we can raise the flag, so to speak, to reach out to them in particular, and probably also in British Columbia as well, just because they're our nearest neighbors, and they also have a similar program, to let them know that we're around, and so that we can not only share information, but they have some fantastic ways of presenting things, and we can maybe share ideas for outreach and education.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions out there? I had another one, which is that has there been discussion informing the program about public land versus private land?
Yeah, that's something that, particularly in dealing with, say, AC Epic, where that's a stipulation, and where appropriate, as appropriate to other taxa, and I think that's something that we're working out with the whole information flow. We want to make sure that we're telling people not only how to recognize the species and record the data, but how to do it appropriately and when is an appropriate time to do it. And I think there's some specificities that we would have to work out, again, probably based on taxa, so that we're telling people the right way to do it, and not having people peeping over the neighbor's fence or something.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a way to anonymize like very particular species, like if they're ranked over a certain level of highest concern, and then they're on private land, if there's a way to just log it within a certain radius of an area.
I think that also boils down to the reporting tool as well, because I know with, for instance, the Weed ID app that Cooperative Extension offers through Bugwood, that is something that we can work into the recorded data parameters, as far as how specific that location information is, or how specifically do we record it, when we put it up to the database in case there are privacy issues. I think it also depends too, again, on what agency wants to get what information. I mean, there may be some things where they just want to hear about it regardless of where it's found, but still we would have to make sure that that's done in an appropriate way, because for the most part, I mean, some of the people doing this will be professional technicians and maybe they'll be operating under some kind of management context, but we also want to make it safe and comfortable for just normal people to be able to report things.
Sure, yeah. Heather has a question. Are there similar programs like this in the lower 48 that have had success in EDRR for new introductions?
Well, I would assume yes, because there's a lot of really successful EDRR examples in the lower 48. I don't have any specifics that I can steer you towards. I haven't actually spoken to any of the entities that I mentioned in one of the slides that have existing programs to just say track their success, other than to know that they have participation and an ongoing outreach and engagement. So there's, I think, success to be measured by that. I've heard in, for the life of me, I can't remember it, but it was just a couple of weeks ago, I was on an online workshop where people from outside were speaking specifically about murder hornets and how, to one extent, it was great to have all the media coverage, but it inundated them with all of these false reports, basically, and having people who were educated enough to know the difference between, as they put it, a yellow jacket and a murder hornet, or a honeybee and a murder hornet, was very useful. And they felt that that contributed to some of the more accurate, reporting that was made. I mean, so I think that's definitely the goal, especially in Alaska, where we are dealing with a lot of EDRR potential. I mean, I'm very happy for people to go out and tell me where the reed canary grass is, but as we've seen just with mothballs in the last few months, it would be fantastic to have an opportunity and to put that word out to people and say, look for this specifically, and here's exactly where to put it.
Visit kenaiinvasives.org to learn more.